Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be teaching you the CSS basics that you need to know to be able to get started using CSS to help you style web pages. So first and foremost, what is CSS? So that acronym stands for Cascading Style Sheets. That's not something that you have to memorize, but the key thing that you have to know is that CSS is not a programming language. It is a style sheet language. You use CSS to style HTML code. So in the first tutorial, we built a very basic web page where we went over HTML basics, right? So that was this HTML project here that we built. Let me pull up my code editor. I should still have this here. Let me go to File, Open Folder, Desktop, HTML project. All right, so if you followed along with me in that HTML tutorial, make sure that you have this pulled open because I'm going to use this to basically teach you CSS basics. And if you don't have this open, just look at the code here. Do not start copying this yet at all because I'm going to delete almost everything here. So just stay tuned. All right. Now, again, CSS is what you use to style HTML. HTML is what you use to define and create the content that you want on your website. So let's say that you want to build a website and you want to have a link or have a button or an image on the website. You would use HTML to put that button on your website. And then let's say that you want that button to have a red background color. You would use CSS to set the background color of that button to red. All right. So when it comes to writing CSS code, the same way that we created an HTML file, we need to create a CSS file, which is where we'll be writing all of our CSS code in. So the first thing that you have to do is come here in your text editor and go to File. Sorry, let me just click on this code. So make sure this is on your actual text editor. I'm using VS Code. So I'm going to go to File and I'm going to go to New File. Now, when you're creating a CSS file, it is a style sheet. Remember, CSS is what you use to style HTML. So typically, the name of this file is called stylesheet.css or styles.css. So here, I'm going to call my stylesheet.css. So style sheet.css. And then I'm going to, let me just zoom in so that you can see that. So you see that here? Stylesheet.css. And then I'm going to click Create New File. And it's going to show that the file name is stylesheet. And the file extension is .css. Remember in the HTML tutorial, the extension that we used was .html. But here, the extension is .css because this tells the browser that this file, this is a CSS file. This is where we are going to be writing our CSS code. All right. And make sure that this is saving into your HTML project or into the folder where you have your HTML file as well. So I'm going to click Create File and boom. We now have this here. So, all right, so now this is my style sheet. So the main thing that you really kind of have to ask now is, how does my HTML file know about my CSS file? Just because these two files are in the same folder doesn't mean that they're connected or talking to each other. So we have to actually connect the CSS file to the HTML. And I'm going to Google this with you so that you can kind of walk through the steps of how to search information like this for yourself as well. So I'm going to open up my browser and I'm going to open up a new tab and I'm going to type HTML connect CSS file, right? Because that's what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to connect my CSS file to my HTML file. So that's what I'm searching up now. So HTML connect CSS file. I'm going to look that up. And let's go to the W3 Schools link here. And I think this is, so this is going to talk to you about the 3 ways to insert CSS. You know, you have your external CSS, internal, inline, etc. right? So external CSS, this is the one that we need to pay attention to because this means that we have a file somewhere where all of our CSS code is, and we want to connect that file to our HTML. So with an external style sheet, you can change the look of an entire website by changing just one file. Each HTML page must include a reference to the external style sheet file inside of the link element, inside of the head element, or inside of the head section. So this is a sample HTML page here, right? And do you see this link element? So you see this like link element is basically how they are using this link element to connect their .css file. You see this? Their .css file inside of the HTML. So their file is called my style. Ours is not called my style. It's just called style sheet. So really, you can just copy this, and you see this is inside of the head tag. So let's go back to our text editor, and let's go to our index.html, and we are going to put this beneath our title tag and put this code here. So this like link is now telling the HTML document that we want to link some kind of document to this HTML file. And this rel stands for relationship. It basically tells you like what type of document is this that you are trying to link. Well, it's a style sheet. We are trying to link a style sheet to this HTML file. And then href, remember with the anchor tag, right? With the actual anchor tag in terms of linking to something, we used an href. So this link tag has an href attribute that you use. And this is where you put the name of the file that you're trying to connect. And if you want a lot more information on how to use this link tag, we can just open up a new tab and look up HTML link tag. And this will take you to a page where you can read a lot more about this link tag and also see all of the different attributes that are available for you to use when it comes to using a link tag. All right, so let's go back to it. So now we need to change the name of this href or of this CSS file to match the name of our CSS file. So our file is called stylesheet.css. So let's now type that, stylesheet.css. Boom. So now our CSS file is now connected to our HTML file. All right. And that's all you have to do. Like, take this link tag and put it inside of your head tag. So you see, this is our opening head tag and this is our closing head tag. And put this link tag inside or nested inside of the head section of your HTML. And make sure that this href, make sure that this is the same name as the name that you gave to your CSS file. So even if I call this file, tjstyles.css, that is the exact file name that I have to put here. All right. So make sure that you save that. So now we can start. Well, let me just clean up a bunch of stuff here. So let's just delete all of these heading tags in our index.html, and let's delete this image, and let's just leave our p tags, because I'm going to use the p tags to pretty much walk through our example to teach you how to use CSS. All right, so everything we've done so far is just HTML in terms of getting ready to connect our CSS file to the HTML file. So delete this BR tag as well. All right, so basically you should have an HTML file that just has some very basic HTML code in it. It doesn't need to be complex. I just have 2 p tags in my HTML file, and that's it. I just have 2 p tags here. So make sure that you are following along so that you can actually code along. I want you writing and typing the code along with me in this tutorial so that you can really start practicing writing code, okay? So I'm gonna put this on 2 screens so that we can look at the HTML file and the CSS file at the same time. And the way that you do that in VS Code is up here. So you see up here, it basically has this thing, split editor right. So click that and it gives you another screen. So I'm gonna grab my CSS tab and bring it over here to the right. And then I'm gonna exit out of this index.html up here. All right, so when we were going over HTML, the thing that we talked about is HTML uses tags, right? In HTML, you have an opening tag and a closing tag, and then you put the content between it, right? This P tag here, right? This is the opening and this is the closing. And the difference between the opening and closing tag is this /. All right. CSS has a completely different syntax. It doesn't use tags, but in CSS, you have to target the element that you want to style. All right. So let me open this HTML file in the browser, and I already have this open actually. So if I refresh this, it should just be this. All right. So this is all that should be in that HTML file. So let's say that I want my P tags to have a red text color, right? So let's look up CSS, change text color, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the text color using CSS. So let's look up what this link goes to in W3 Schools, and boom, the property that we are looking for is called color. The color property is used to set the color of text, and you can actually write a name like red, right? So if you want the color to be red, you just type red. And these are examples here. So this is the body and this is the H1. So basically this code is saying target all the H1 elements and set the color of the text to green, right? And you'll see that this is the syntax of CSS. CSS uses curly braces. It uses curly braces to write a CSS rule. So let's say that we want our P tags, these P tags to have a red text color. We will write P, lowercase p, right? Because we are trying to target the P elements. We will write P in this style sheet here, then we will press spacebar to put a space, and then we will put our opening curly braces. So do you see the curly braces? My cursor is between it right now, so I'm going to hit enter. So now I can write whatever CSS rule that I want to set for all the P elements. So CSS has rules. It's called rules. Like you are writing a rule for this P element. So if I want the text color of all the P elements to be red, that's a CSS rule, okay? And if we go back to the documentation, the way that you change the color of an element is inside of your curly braces, you write color, right? Because this is the property that you want to change. Color is the property that you want to change. And then you put your colon, you see that colon? And then you type the name of the color that you want, right? So I'm going to come here and I'm going to type color and I'm going to type red. And you put a semicolon after it. So you see here, you put a semicolon after every rule that you write. You put a semicolon. And make sure that you save this, all right? So command save on my end. And now I'm going to go to my HTML file, right? So remember, we just saved those changes. And for us to see the new changes that we made, we need to refresh. So if you refresh the page, you see, oh, that the actual text color is now red. All right. So here, if I go back and I change this to yellow, that's probably going to hurt my eyes, but let's see. So we come here, refresh. Whew. And you see it's yellow. let me put that to green. Oh my God. There we go. Yeah, green. So basically you can play around with this if you want, but that is how you write CSS. If you're watching this video, that means you're interested in learning to code and making a career switch to becoming a software engineer. And that's exactly what I did. My name is TJ Oyeniyi, and I'm a self-taught software engineer that still works as a software engineer while teaching complete beginners like yourself how to code and help them to get jobs as software engineers by working with them as their mentor. To learn more about working with me as your mentor, check out my coding bootcamp, Roots Technology. I'll put the link in the description below as well. In CSS, you have to target the HTML element that you want to style. So in this code, we are targeting the P element by writing P. So you can target elements by just writing the name of the element, right? If we had a button element in our HTML file, we can target that button by just writing button because that is the name of the element. So you can target an HTML element by writing in CSS by writing the name of the element. So here, this code is targeting all the P elements in our HTML file and it's setting the color to green. All right, so this is one of the main ways of targeting elements in CSS by writing the name of that element. Because you see here, we type P, and this now targets all of the P elements in our HTML and applies this CSS rule to them. But what if we have 3 P elements here? Let me create one more. I'm just gonna say this is my third P tag. What if, so now we have 3 P elements here. What if we want 2 of these P elements to have the same styling, but not the third one. So another way that we can target elements in CSS is by putting a class attribute. That's a class attribute. Now, yeah, let's say we want this top P element and this bottom P element to have red color text. How can we target just those two and leave the other one? We can use what's called a class attribute. And a class attribute is an attribute that we define in the opening tag of the elements that we want to apply the same styling to. So here we will come here and retype class equal to, and we have to give this class a name. Here I'm just gonna call it red. You can call it anything you want, but here I'm gonna call it red. So basically this class has to be on this P tag as well. And then inside of our style sheet, we need to target this class. So how do we target a class attribute? Or how do we target an element that has a class attribute? The way that we target a class is by putting a period and then writing the name of that class. So in our CSS, we put period and the name of the class is red. And then we would just do our normal syntax with the curly braces. And now we can do color red, semicolon. So now this rule applies to every HTML element here that has the class red on it. The color will be set to red. So if we now go back to our browser and we refresh, boom, you see that? So now the first one has the red font color and the second P tag has the red font color. This is what's called a class attribute. Sort of like how in school, multiple students can be in the same class. In this example, the students are the HTML elements, right? Multiple elements can have the same class attribute on them. And we can write a CSS rule that targets any element with that class. So this rule here is basically for this class red, this is the rule that we are applying, right? So pretty much any HTML element that we want to have this styling, we would just have to add this class red to that element, all right? Now, something else that we can do, we have ID attributes, right? So a class attribute or an ID attribute. The ID is how we target an individual element. So think ID, individual, sort of like your ID, right? Like you have a driver's license ID, most likely, right? You have some kind of passport, identification, you have some type of ID whenever someone asks you for your ID. That ID is unique to you. Only you have that exact ID. So when it comes to HTML elements, it's the exact same rule. Only one element can have a specific ID. Multiple elements cannot have the same ID attribute. If you want to apply the same CSS code to multiple elements, you have to use a class attribute. But if you want to apply a specific CSS rule to just one element, you can put an ID attribute on that element to make it easier for you to just target that specific element, okay? So let's say that I want to add an ID attribute to this third P tag. And let's say that I want the font size to be 24 pixels or something. Let's say that I basically wanted to have a really big font size. I'm gonna add an ID attribute again in the opening tag. So all of your attributes are gonna be added to the opening tag of the element, all right? That's key. All of your attributes are gonna be on the opening tag of the element. So ID equal to, I'm just gonna call it big text. And you see how I put that hyphen there? You can't put a space. You cannot put a space here. Either you just write it as one word or you put a hyphen there. All right, because that's still one word, okay? And the same goes for the way that you name your class attributes as well. You can't put a space between the class attributes. If you put a space, that is just going to be seen as two different attributes. Or so here, let's say that small text, so an attribute can have more than one class on it. It can have more than one class defined on it. So this p tag right now, it has a class called red and another class called small text. And I can write different CSS rules for each of those classes. All right. So just keep that in mind. Like an attribute can have more than one class attribute defined for it. Oh, an element can have multiple class attributes on it. But you can only have one ID. Remember that ID is just ID, individual. You know, it's just one. Only you have that ID. Only that element should have this ID. I should not see an ID of big text anywhere else in this screen. I can see a class with that name, but you don't want to give a class attribute the same name as an ID attribute. Like that's just going to be confusing for you. All right. So big text. How do we target an ID attribute, right? How do we target an element with an ID attribute? We know that with a class attribute, the way we target it is with a period in front and then the name of the attribute. You see up here? And we have that period and we have the name of the attribute. But the way that we target an ID is with the pound sign. So the pound sign and the name of the attribute is big text, big hyphen text. And then we just do our normal CSS syntax with the curly braces. Boom. All right. So how do we increase the font size of an element? Well, let's go look it up, right? So let's open up a new tab, and the technology we're working with is CSS. So we're going to type CSS, increase font size. There we go. Increase font size. And we can go read about this here. And we see, oh, that the property that we are looking for is called font size. The font size property sets the size of the text, right? So you see, these are just different examples of how to increase the font size. And it uses something called pixels. So 40 pixels. So here, let's try changing ours 40 pixels. So font size, 40 pixels, semicolon, and then let's go to our, make sure that you save that, by the way. And let's go to our web page and let's refresh, and boom. You see this one now has a bigger font size, and only this one, right? Like only this element is targeted, right? Because remember, this is an ID attribute. And the way that you know that is because it has this pound sign in front of it. The way you target an ID attribute is by putting a pound sign and then the name of that attribute. If you're learning a lot in this video, keep in mind, this is what learning to code with me as your mentor is like. Anytime you get stuck and you need help, you can schedule a Zoom call with me where we work one-on-one together on an issue like this. Or you can just email me and I'll get back to you that way. But having a mentor there to guide you and ask questions to is the best way to speed up your coding journey so that you're not wasting time being stuck or working on things that don't matter. So if you're ready to start your coding journey and become a software engineer, come join me in my coding bootcamp at www.rootstechnology.info. So now we can see inside of our HTML that the element with the ID of big text is this third p tag here. So this is the only element that should have an ID of big text. So now you know 3 ways to target elements using CSS, right? The first way is up here, right? By you just targeting that element basically. So this rule on line number 1 of our CSS, it targets all the p elements. All the p tags on the page are going to get this rule. And then if you want to target just like a group of elements, right? A group of elements, you can use the class attribute. You can create a class and put that class on all the elements that you want to apply that CSS rule to. So we have our class attribute red here. And you can name this stuff anything you want. I just put red because that's the CSS rule that I'm writing inside of it. So, and the way you target a class attribute is by putting a period and the name of the class. And then the third way that we can target elements in CSS is using the ID attribute. So we have here, the way you target an ID is by having the pound sign and then the name of that ID. And remember, all this has to be specified on the opening tag of the element that you're trying to target. So this is going to help you identify and figure out which elements you are trying to target. All right. So again, now you know 3 ways to target elements using CSS by just targeting that specific element, like all those tags, by the p tag, or by using a class attribute, or by using an ID attribute. So now let's talk about a very important concept in CSS, and that is the box model. This concept of the box model, where every element is a box. Every element is a box that has certain properties. So if we go to our web page and let's just open up a new tab and let's look up CSS box model. CSS box model. Every HTML element is a box, and it has certain properties that you can target in CSS. Every element is a box that has certain properties that you can target in CSS, and it's called the box model. So look up CSS box model and press enter, and let's go to this W3 Schools link here. So you see, this is it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So when we had our p tag, right? Remember, you have the opening tag and the closing tag, and the content goes between the opening and closing. This is the content right here. This is that content. And according to the box model, outside of the content, you have a padding. And then outside of the padding, you have a border. And then outside of that, you have the margin. So what does all this mean, right? So come down here. This is the explanation of the different parts. The content of the box is where the text and images appear, right? Remember, inside of the opening and closing tags. The padding is the area around the content, and it is transparent. The padding is transparent. It's just the area around the content. The border is a border that goes around the padding and content. So all this like this green one, this is the border. And then the margin, it clears an area outside of the border. The margin is transparent. The box model allows us to add a border around elements and to define space between the elements. So here, this is an example of using the box model, right? So when you have this property border, and you have the padding, and you have margin, and I'm gonna walk through this with you. So let's see. Now, I'm sure that this is a bit different from what you've seen before in terms of just typically, like, you just write one like value for a CSS property, like width, boom. But here you have 3 different values here. So let's go look at how this border actually works. So we can open up a new tab and type CSS border property and press enter. And let's go into this W3 Schools link. And basically, the border property is a shorthand property for the border width, the border style, which is required, and the border color. So that's what these 3 values stand for. The first value stands for the border width. Basically, how thick do we want this border to be? And the second value stands for the border style, right? And let's click on that actually. So let's go to the style. I'm going to click on this style, and that should basically, show us different styles that we can do, right? So you see dotted, solid, double, dashed, etc. Like, these are all different values that like you can use when it comes to the border style. All right, so you have solid, dotted, double, etc. And this is stuff that we'll play with. And then let's go back. So press back to where we were before when we were looking at CSS border property. And the third value is the border color. The border color. The border color. So basically, anywhere you see like a border property and you see these 3 values, okay, that this first one is basically how thick do we want this border to be? What is the width of the border? And then the second value is what style is our border in? Do we want a solid border, a dotted, etc.? And then what color do we want the border to be? So let's go try this on one of our elements actually. So let's do it on this p tag here, the one with the ID big text. All right, the one with the ID big text. So if remember, we only want to target this third P element. How do we do that? By using the ID attribute. So basically now we can come inside of this ID attribute and we can add more CSS rules and more properties that we want to apply to the element that has this ID attribute. Right? So we want to add a border to this third P tag, and we can target this third P tag by using its ID attribute. So we can add more properties to this ID attribute. All right, so let's come here and let's do border. And how thick do we want the border to be? Let's just do 10 pixels. So that's pixels is going to be, like the measurement of size, and is in px. So you can play around with this to kind of see, okay, this is what 5 pixels looks like. This is what 10 looks like. This is what 50 looks like. Just kind of play around with different values to, help you to see how that changes. Okay. All right. So the first value when you're working with the border is the border width, and we have defined ours as 10 pixels. And next is the border style. So let's just do solid. And then next, what color do we want this border to be? Let's do blue, right? So blue, and then semicolon. So you can write more than one CSS rule for an attribute that you are targeting. So now this ID attribute, it has 2 CSS rules in it. So this CSS is basically saying find the element that has the ID attribute big text, boom, this P tag. Set the font size to 40 pixels, and then set the border to this. So let's go see how that looks now, right? So let's go back to our web page and let's refresh, and boom, you see that? Remember, according to the box model, every HTML element is a box that has a border, a margin, and padding, and those are properties that you can manipulate. So that's what I'm going to walk you through now. So we just started playing around with the border property now, right? Because if we go back here, this is the border that we just wrote a CSS rule for. This is the border. So here, let me change that solid to dotted. I've actually never done dotted, so let's see what this looks like dotted when we change this to dotted and refresh. Interesting. All right, so I'm gonna change it back to solid. I like that better. So solid, refresh. All right, so that is the border property. Up next, let's see what else we can play with. The padding, right? So padding, remember, padding is the area around the content. The padding is transparent. So you can basically increase or decrease the area around the content. So you see in this example, they are using pixels to set the value of the padding. So this is our content, right? This is my third P tag. That is the content inside of the opening and closing P tag. The padding is the space around it. So let's see what our P tag is going to look like once we increase the padding. So let's increase the padding to see what change that actually puts on here. So let's go back to our CSS. And remember, the CSS rules we're writing, we want to target this third P tag. So we have to write it all inside of the ID attribute big text. All right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to write padding, and let's just do 30 pixels, and let's see what that looks like. Let's just see what that looks like just to kind of have a base to go from. So I added a padding of 30 pixels to this ID attribute, big text, and this ID attribute is on this third P tag. So when I come here and I refresh, I haven't refreshed yet. So just keep your eye on this. This is my third P tag. And then when I refresh, let's see what happens. Boom. Do you see how the space around this text increased? Do you see how that space increased? Right? Let me change this from 30 to 50. So I basically increased it again. So the space around this content, this text should get bigger. So if I refresh, and boom, you see that? Feel free to play with this on your own. But I think now this this picture should be making a bit more sense to you, right? Like when you have your content and the space around the content is the padding, you know, like the padding. And the padding is inside of the border. And now margin, so margin is really important. This is the area outside of the border. The margin is the area outside of the border. What does that mean? If we go back here, so you see how this is my third P tag, literally. So this is my third P tag. The space around this space, the space between this P tag and this second P tag, this space right here, this is called the margin. So if I want to move this P tag further away from this second one, if I want to move this third, you see this box, this blue box, this third box, if I want to move this box further away from this second P tag, I can use the margin to move it away. Because remember, the margin is the space around the outside, around the border, the space outside of the border of that element. So, and again, we use pixels. We use pixels here. So let me go in here and let me increase this margin. And I'm just gonna do 20 pixels just so we can have a base to go from. So I put a margin of 20 pixels there. And let's go back here and let's refresh and just keep your eye on this space over here, okay? And to see how much this increases, or sorry, decreases. So if I come here and I change this to 200 pixels, let's see how this actually increases now. You see that? So that now increases that space by 200 pixels. So this is now further, so this P tag is now further away from this element here, from this second P tag. That is the margin. Something that we have to, here, let me see if this page actually addresses this here. It doesn't, but let me go look at the CSS margin property. CSS margin property. Let's look that up real quick. Boom. This is what I wanted to kind of show you. So here, you can actually target a specific side of the margin. Let's say that you only wanted to target the space on the top. You can do margin top. Let's say you only wanted to target the space on the bottom, you know, margin bottom. Let's say you wanted to move it, boom, this way, you know, you can do margin left, margin on the left side, and you can increase that. So here, let's play with that actually. So let me go back. I'm just going to remove this and let's refresh. Boom. So let's say that we want to increase the space on this left side, right? This is the left side of our P tag. So you see our P tag. So the left side outside of the border, because inside of the border is the padding, and the padding has the same thing. You can do padding top, padding bottom, padding left, padding right. All right. So I'm going to show you how to do that with the margin. But keep in mind, the same concept that applies with the margin applies with the padding, okay? In terms of you being able to target each specific side of it, all right? And the same thing with border. Border top, border bottom, border right, border left, all right? So let's say that we want to target this left side. This is the left side. We want to increase the space on the left side. This would be margin left, all right? Margin left. This is we want to increase that space. So let's do, it's going to be margin hyphen. So you see here, I mean, even my text editor is like already kind of giving me clues here. So margin left, colon, and we want to, let's set that to 50 pixels just to see what that looks like. Margin left. So the expectation is once I refresh, this box should move right? Because I'm increasing the space on the left. So it should move to the right. I'm increasing the space on the left, so it should move to the right. So when I refresh, you see that? Here, let me increase this to 80 pixels. It should go further right because I am increasing this space here. Boom. Let me just put this to 180. Let's just be a bit extreme. to 180 and refresh. All right. So that should make sense. Now here, margin top, just to show you how that works too. Margin top, colon, let's do 200 pixels. Let's come here. So that should push this box down, right? Because we are increasing the space on the top. So if I refresh, boom, you see that? You see how it pushed it down? So you have margin top, margin left, margin right, and margin bottom. Those are all different properties that you can target in CSS because of the box model. Every element is a box that has a margin and a padding that you can manipulate, and a border, and a border, and a border. All right, and a border. All right, so let me CSS padding. This is something that you should also look up as well. Like, just make sure that you have these pulled up so that you can actually look at what these properties are and just play around with these properties on your own, and also kind of like read through this and play around with these exercises. You see these examples, just click try it yourself here and change these values and then hit run, right? If I do padding top and I change this to 150, right? And I hit run, it should increase this, right? That's a padding, hit run, boom. You see that? So play around with these examples to help you to just better understand what's going on here. All right. So remember, same thing with the border. You can have border top, border bottom, border right, etc. You can target each side of the box model. And that's it. Like, that is the CSS box model. That is a very important concept for you to understand when it comes to CSS, right? So these are the main concepts in CSS that you really need to know. You need to know how to target HTML elements by the name of the element, by just targeting by targeting all of those elements. If you want to target every single one, you need to know how to target elements by using a class attribute. Remember, a class attribute, we put a class attribute on the opening tag, and the way we target it in CSS is by putting a period and then the name of the class. And also, you need to know how to target elements using an ID attribute. So you see, we add the ID attribute here, and you see inside of the opening tag, you can have you can have a class attribute on an element, and you can have an ID attribute on an element. An element can have more than one class name. The same way a student in school takes multiple classes, right? It's the same concept. So an element can have multiple classes, so you can write different CSS rules for the different classes. All right. I don't have a CSS rule for small text. It was just me creating another class name just to show you how to add it, right? All you do is you put a space between the two different class names, right? So this way, red is a class and small text is a class. And here, I can even this is another class. But keep in mind, when you are writing your class names, if you put a space between the class name, it's just gonna look as if it's another class. If you want to use two words or multiple words in a class name, like I'm doing here with small text, use a hyphen. Use a hyphen, or do like camel case, right? Where the second word starts with a capital letter, all right? And you have to write it exactly like this in the CSS, okay? So that's it when it comes to just the basics of CSS. This is how you target elements, by using the name of the element. Make sure you understand the difference between an ID attribute and a class attribute. And then the box model, the CSS box model. So definitely look through all of the different resources that I covered and showed you here to help you to better understand this. Let me tell you how learning to code changed my life. I went from making $37,000 a year and living paycheck to paycheck to my first job as a software engineer paid me $75,000 a year. That's almost double what I was making before. So now I don't have to fly Spirit Airlines all the time anymore, and I can actually afford a real vacation. And since I change jobs every 1 to 2 years, I started making 6 figures my 3rd year as a software engineer. That's what this career change can do for you. Now I have the skills to learn anything technical and get a job in a lot of different roles and industries because of my technical skills. So don't waste time putting off learning to code if you know you're interested in making a career change. Get started now so you can be ready to start applying to jobs soon. Come learn to code with me as your mentor at rootstechnology.info.